Contract with private industry allows you to go back and recover those damages for the taxpayer. And I think we've overlooked that as we've grown government.
That's, of course, there's a task force for doing that with Governor Christie right now. They've also talked about the Yellow Pages testing. Would this be more drastic somehow than what they're planning?
I think if you look through ours, we actually applied it. We didn't just talk about it. And I think that's the big difference. I think Governor Christie, in many ways, he talked about cutting, but when you go down through his budget, and that's why we really encourage people to read this program by program and then look at the governor's budget and see who really cut funds. Move to the next one. Department of Community Affairs. Here's another example where we spent more money. We restored a significant amount of money, $969 million, to local assistance. You know, we felt like that part of what was happening in this budget of Governor Christie's was they were transferring a lot of the burden onto local entities, which would force tax increases. There was already enough difficulty at the local level. Just the translocation of expense is not cutting budget. The next one, and I won't go over each one in each detail. You can read yourself.
Why don't we go through?
And the Department of Corrections, you want to stop there for just a second? Because I think there's an interesting point to be made here. The common sense would tell you that if your incarceration goes up, which is usually what happens in a recession, and you cut back on the overtime of your Department of Correction officers, plus you cut back on your funding to the local sources of confinement, i.e. your sheriffs, that you're going to have a growing population in your Department of Corrections, but yet Governor Christie shows a budget savings in cutting overtime of correction officers. I think that flies in the face of common sense. We took a different approach to it, that we looked hard at the concept of GPS for some nonviolent, expanding that program. It's already here, but there was plenty of room to expand. There's plenty of other states that have done it more widely than New Jersey. And also the concept of looking at the private prisons more aggressively. The private prisons have shown they can do it at a lower cost in most states where they've gone in. And once again, you have that opportunity to hold them accountable should they not perform. Next one. Department of Education. I'm going to let Steve talk about this because we did a lot of work on this. New Jersey was a very unique situation, and I think Steve has a better answer.
Well, I think with the Department of Education, obviously the biggest issue right out today is the issue with the school funding formula, and especially today with school board elections, what you're going to see is towns, some are going to pass budgets, some are going to vote them down. But having dealt with this as a mayor for 12 years, I know the system better than anybody. I've confronted this issue. The school budget is introduced to the public with the 4% increase or so, and it gets defeated. It's going to go back to the mayor and council. Mayors and councils will then sit down, meet with the school board, and determine what to do. They could increase that budget. They could cut it. They could do the traditional token cut that you hear about all the time, and then the school board then has the opportunity, if they don't like the cuts, if they feel they're too deep, to go back to the Department of Education, to Brett Schundler, to appeal those cuts. I think it's going to be pretty remarkable to watch what happens with that. Actually could be kind of entertaining to see what is going to happen when school boards, if they're able to put a sound argument that education is being impacted, because that Department of Education can get back that money. It happened to me as a mayor. When I cut school board funding in 2003, they went back to the state, and the state returned every penny of that money. But beyond that, even if a town freezes spending, even if a town that's lost a lot of state aid freezes spending, gets teachers to take a pay freeze, in many of those towns, they're still going to see big tax hikes as a result of loss of state aid. So people will have made the sacrifices they were asked to make. They're going to get hit with big tax hikes anyway. I think this is a political powder keg. I also think it's very bad for the economy to force suburban taxpayers to see bigger tax hikes again in this housing market while the state government gets even bigger. Part of our program is to put that money back into school funding formula and actually enhance it. I'm going to have Colette Campbell explain our school funding formula that we funded to our budget, because she's done a ton of work on this. It's a better job than me.
So our funding is divided almost 50% to the Abbott and the non-Abbott districts, which totals, our total funding is $8.43 billion, which is higher than Governor Christie's proposed funding for school districts. And to give you a sample of how, I don't think you can see it too well on the screen, how the school money is put back, as Steve alluded to, is we restored money for ABIT districts to the 2010 base levels, which were Governor Corzine's numbers without pre-K funding, as we've eliminated all pre-K funding in this budget. We put that money back in within each of the ABIT districts, totaling $285 million funding that we've allocated for school choice programs, which will now be utilized for the competition within these school districts. The money that went into the non-ABIT districts, can't see it, I can't blow it up anymore, unfortunately, is again restored to 2010 base levels to Governor Corzine, and then an additional $500 million